Welcome back to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. I've got an amazing guest on today, Patti Handy. She is a financial coach and been around the world here with her businesses. And I cannot wait to dig into some of the things that she's working on with some of the women that she works with, mindset, money, and all the things going on right now. Patti, thank you so much for making time. And if you could just give our listeners a little bit of a quick outline of what all that you do.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I appreciate you having me. It's going to be a great conversation. So, I am a financial coach. As you mentioned, I was a financial advisor and a mortgage advisor. And as a result of just countless conversations with ladies that I've had who come across my desk who were just challenged with feeling confident with their money, they were embarrassed, there was a lot of shame around money, they were confused, they were overwhelmed, a lot of fear. And some of the conversations we couldn't address as, a financial advisor or mortgage advisor. So I took the leap of faith, left my firm, and went out on my own as a financial coach. And that's what I do now, working with women and primarily focus on working with divorced, widowed, and single women. But I've helped others as well who are happily married.
Divorced, widowed, and what was the last part?
And
And single. And you mentioned kind of your background also in the mortgage industry. And one of the things that I saw from some data from 2022 that single women owned more homes as a first-time home buyer than single men going back a few years. So some interesting times, at least in the mortgage world, but also just in general with the demographics and millennials and Gen Z, et cetera.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
What is the one thing that stands out in this process of building this business and working with the people that you do? What's the one thing that stands out that something that you learned along the way that you just didn't even realize was even possible?
From myself perspective, from my own experience,
Hmm.
it's a great question. I think the number one thing is that I have found that I'm far more resilient than I thought I was. And stepping into the world of entrepreneurship is a PhD in personal development. We certainly, the journey is not just about learning the business and the academics of what I teach and what I do as a coach, but it's just the mindset and like I said, the resilience and what I have to do every day to just build that business. It's brave, it's courageous. You deal with the punches and you get back up. And it's this personal development on steroids, really.
So this business, how long have you been? How long have you been operating?
I left my firm in April of 23, so it's been about 5 months. And yeah, went out on my own pretty much immediately when I left my company.
And was this something that you were doing on the side
No,
before that?
unfortunately, I couldn't because it was a conflict because I was in the financial services industry. There's heavy
Okay.
compliance, can't do both. So it was percolating in my mind as far as what I wanted to do and how I wanted to sort of help women and what I wanted to create, but I could not do both at the same time.
Yeah, being in the mortgage industry and all the licensing and the requirements and the laws, yeah, that makes sense. But you've been in this world of finance and helping people for years. What would you say is the one thing that people are struggling with right now?
I think, which is certainly understandable, there's a lot of fear around money. There is a lot of fear around I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm afraid I'm going to run out of money. Those that are approaching retirement, there's the fear of will I be a burden to my family? Will I be able to retire when I want, how I want, and still enjoy the lifestyle that I have? There's just the fear of how am I going to pay my bills? Things are tough right now. And there's a lot of that panic. And there's definitely the reality of these circumstances, but there's also the reality that we don't address, which is really our subconscious and our relationship with our money and our money mindset and how that plays a part in how we respond to those fears. Because we can get completely consumed with fear and then just have this paralysis, which causes more fear around money because we don't do anything. But once we get to the root and the foundation of our money fears and concerns, it's a little bit better in terms of being able to navigate moving forward.
So you gave some examples, running out of money, be a burden to family, retire, and how am I going to be able to continue the similar lifestyle? Fear of
Mhm.
how to pay the bills and panic. of all those things, the one that kind of strikes me is like, oh shit, like what the hell am I gonna do?
Mhm.
Fear of how am I gonna pay the bills, run out of money. Part of that is like, oh shit, I need to be able to do something right here, right now. And then you also mentioned kind of that paralysis, the fear and kind of the analysis paralysis, all these things they don't know what to do. And so maybe people just don't do anything at all. And I'm guilty of that myself. What's the what's that process look like to be able to address the situation and the problem and try to kind of come to some problem solving solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of unpacking in that, and each person's individual. But basically, we start with understanding their money story, understanding what it is that they heard growing up in their childhood, what their limiting beliefs are as a result of their nervous system kind of thermostat. If they grew up in a family where there was a lot of fear and scarcity around money, then that is something that is familiar to us. And although it's a living hell, it is familiar, so it feels safe to us. And the reality is that our external results, 95% of our external results, are really a result of our subconscious programming, which is that limiting beliefs that we have playing in our mind. It's kind of like going on in our mind. So it is uncovering a lot of that, understanding what's playing underneath the foundation of, okay, there's a real problem here. I'm fearful of running out of money, and this is scary. But if you stay stuck there, if you stay stuck in that fear, you're going to attract more fear. You're going to attract more scarcity, more lack. That's the law of attraction at its best, right? It's like if you focus on the fear, you're going to attract more of that. If you focus on, you know what, I am in a position right now where things are tight. This is temporary. This is a chapter in my life that is not permanent. There's options, there's possibilities, there's opportunities, there's lots of money to be made out there in the world. There's lots of people who are making tons of money in this environment, and I can too. I've got to just be open to it. I'm going to be open to the possibilities. I'm going to have a fun, enjoyable time on that journey, and it becomes a little lighter. That walk is a little bit lighter, not this heavy burden of, oh my gosh, it's a shit show. And I'm just going to be, this is just trouble, because that's going to get you just more stuck in mud. So you've got to get that mindset shift done. You've got to unpack that subconscious tape recorder and then move forward. And that's a process. That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's a process and it takes days, weeks, months of work to address the problem, identify it, and then keep working on it. Because like I think it's Alex Hormozy out there talking about, we don't need more teaching, we need more reminding of stuff that we need to do. And like I'm personally like I'm the same way. It's like, I have all the things that I do, but if I want to do something different, I need to be doing it over and over until it just clicks in and you need to build that habit. But you were gonna say something, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say it's also taking action among that. Once you acknowledge that there's something that needs to be changed, it's not about just thinking about it. It's about taking action and inspired action.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that in my industry in mortgage, right? Like there's this delayed time frame or delayed gratification, if you want to call it that, in terms of like the activities that you do until you actually may get the reward, so to speak, in terms of being able to close deals, close business.
Right.
And you have all these different things that you could do, and you don't know when the results or if the results are going to come. So that's just me personally. Right? There's a million things to do. Which ones do you choose to spend time on? And then if you keep bouncing back and forth, you're never going to get anywhere. But you got to be able to work on things over, weeks and months. With the clients that you work with, would you say that people come through your program and just they get it, they click, and they get it quickly, and they keep working on it, and it's a straight path, or is it, a journey of ups and downs? How is the typical process of the people you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. Nothing happens fast. When you're dealing with coaching, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with mindset. It's definitely a long game. You aren't going to walk in. It's like walking into a gym. You can't go into a gym and work out once and suddenly you have big muscles and a six pack, right? It takes consistency. It takes patience. It's grace to yourself. It's persistence and consistency. So if you're looking for a quick fix, it's going to be a painful journey because it doesn't happen in a quick fashion. You've got to be in it for the long game. And depending upon what you're facing, what you're dealing with, will be, depending upon what you end up doing. So you made a comment earlier about we want this immediate gratification. Well, if you plant a seed for a tree, it's years before it actually bears fruit, right? First, the tree will be planted or the seeds planted, then it grows and it has leaves and it has fruit. And by the time you can harvest the fruit, it could, be a long time. So you've got to take that same mindset, depending on what you're working on, to let that happen. But know that what you're doing to that seed is going to matter. Like if you water it and you feed it nutrients and you take care of it, it's going to grow and do really well. If you ignore it, you never water it, it's going to die, right? So same thing with life and anything else you're dealing with, you've got to nurture that. So as you are, well, let me back up. The first thing you want to do is really get a solid understanding of what you truly want in life. And oftentimes when I ask clients that, it's hard to answer. People are like, well, I want just enough money. Well, be more specific. Tell me more. Well, I want, this, that. Okay, tell me more. Go deeper. Be very specific about what you truly want. You just can't say, I want money freedom and time freedom. We all want that, right? World peace, right? It's like there's going to be more specific. So get crystal clear on what you want and then look at where you are today with that particular situation. So if you want financial peace, what does that look like? $1 million in the bank, $2 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is that figure is for you. Is it X number of dollars per month in cash flow? Is it the time freedom to be able to travel and have fun? Is it, what does that look like for you? Be very specific and then create that plan. But I kind of went off on a tangent there a little bit, but that clarity in terms of where you want to go and where you want to end up is super important to start with. That's kind of the beginning of planting that seed.
So if somebody out there is listening to this and you've got some tools on your website, so pattyhandy.com, you have a free guide out there. What would someone expect to see if they wanted to be able to get a little bit of a taste of what you have going on and how you do things like that? What's going to be in that guide that they're going to be able to get to if they want to check it out?
Yeah, it's a free download. It's an ebook that I wrote and a short training. The ebook is kind of geared towards the women that I speak to, the divorced, widowed, single women. And it is a guide for women who wants to flourish financially and in life post divorce or loss of a spouse. So it's a lot of life coaching, a lot of things that I did after my divorce that helped me to kind of get through and move forward and flourish in life after my divorce. And then there's some financial tips. And then there's a short video training. It's about 30, 35 minutes about some real technical information that is training. And that's all free. And it's Patty with an I and Handy with a Y. People get that backwards sometimes. So it's, yeah,
Patty Handy. So PATIHANDY.com.
Right. Correct.
Cool. So if anybody has questions, they can message you or grab an email or a phone number on there and message you, I guess, as well.
Yes, my contact page. They can submit a question to me on the contact page. I also offer a free 30-minute conversation, a discovery call. So if you go to the contact page, my calendar's on there and they can book a call with me. It's totally free. I'm not doing a heavy sales thing. It's just like, let me see how I can help you.
So you mentioned that the business, started in 2023 officially, but you've been doing all kinds of things in the finance world. When you look back on your journey through the different types of industries and companies, is there a moment in time that kind of stands out as a kind of a major point that, shifted and changed the trajectory of, where you are today and how you got here today?
I would say, speaking of a seed being planted, right after my divorce, which has been a lot of years, I remember laying in this fetal position, sobbing, overwhelmed with sadness and grief about the loss of my husband. And I had this 18-month-old baby that I was now fully responsible for in terms of raising on a full-time basis. And I wanted his life to be beautiful. And so there's a lot of fear and overwhelm and just all the mess that you go through in a divorce. And I had this very odd, strange download that was like, I call it a God wink, where I heard in my head, you're going to be okay financially because you know how to manage your money. And it was just the most honest, random thing. And I wasn't even thinking about finances. I was just thinking about, my son. And I was so sad that he wasn't going to have the traditional family life with mom and dad at home. And that was going on. And so sometime after I came out of the fog and the black cloud of all that, I remember thinking, you know what, someday I'm going to take this experience and I'm going to serve women who are doing life alone and help them understand their finances. And shortly after my divorce, I went into the mortgage business and was there for 17 years and had lots of conversations with ladies. And I always thought about this in the back of my head. How am I going to help with women? But I was busy raising my son and making a living and just, getting by in life. And then I went into financial services. When I was a financial advisor, I had more conversations with women. And I just decided, what, it's time. So it's one of those things where it was 20 years in the making. And I just pulled the plug. But the seed was planted, you know, over 2 decades ago with what I wanted to do with my life and how I was going to serve and make a bigger difference and make a bigger impact in the world.
17 years in the mortgage industry. Whew, man, I got it in 2006. So what is that? 17 years, I guess. Oh, 17 years
So,
right there. Yeah, it's flown by. I was telling somebody recently, is like, I got it in when I first got out of college. And, I've seen a lot, done a lot. I mean, worked crazy amounts of hours in every shape and form. And I was like, we're going through crazy times right now with just the lack of inventory. And
right.
like, it just hit me. I'm like, the average age of a loan officer is like 47, some whatever number in the late 40s. I'm like, actually, like, I'm actually just hitting my prime. Holy shit. Like, kind of that same point you made before about like mindset and, open to possibilities and all that stuff. It's like, you can get down on something and like, okay, this is tough and it's, we're going to struggle, blah, 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 and have negative thoughts on it. But it's like, oh shit, there's massive opportunity there. And that's something that, people that I talk to, like, that's what, whether you're a realtor or a mortgage person or anyone else in whatever industry, it's like people are struggling, but it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity not only to grab market share, but to get better, to get to this whole kind of downshift in our industry is literally like why I'm here talking to you. In May of 2022, I had an aha moment that I'll share for a different day. Like, oh shit, what I'm doing probably isn't going to be good enough. And then by June, more stuff was happening. I started reading Atomic Habits. I'm like, okay, speaking of kids, like, I'm laying on the floor with our twin boys, trying to get them to go to sleep. And it's like 8:30. And like in my mind, I'm thinking I got work to do. I need to jump back in and log in to get some stuff done. And that stress of like, okay, well, I'm exhausted, I'll do it tomorrow versus trying to like ramp up and do it. Atomic Habits is something that I was reading at the time, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to do 2 minutes. If 2 minutes is the worst that I can do, and just don't break the chain and do 30 days in a row, if 2 minutes is the worst that I can do, then it's okay. That was important for me to be able to help take off the pressure. And I literally would set a timer for 2 minutes, and like 2 minutes is up, and then walk away. That was the most foreign thing I've ever done. And then within a week or so, I was like, that reprogramming of my brain, like, instead of it being a stressful thing, it was an energizing thing. I was looking forward to logging back in and working on it. Like, literally by July 12th, I started posting on Instagram, First Try for 25. In September, the podcast started. And I started doing two podcasts a week. And here we are today. Like, literally all the things that you're talking about. Like, that's why I'm so excited to have you on, because all the things that you talked about 20 years ago led to this. You can't get there. You can't get to here without that stuff.
Right, right. Good for you. That's awesome. And you know what? The cool thing is that you took that action. You didn't just think about it. You took the action, you did it, and you created the new habits. You created the new neural pathways in your brain. And at 2 minutes, easy peasy. Just jump on, jump off. And that also probably made your time with your kids that much more special, knowing that you could be fully present with them at that moment. So,
100%. 100%.
yeah, good for you.
The journey into financial services, how long did you do that for?
I was a financial advisor about 2.5 years.
Okay. And that's a tough business too. What's one thing that stands out, going through that process and that journey that you take with you every day?
I would have to say probably the resilience again. Getting all the licenses required to be an advisor is not an easy task. I had to do, several tests and they were all very challenging. And I passed them all the first time, which was very exciting. So it was just the resilience of moving forward, being consistent and courageous, and then learning the industry. Met, wonderful clients, learned, a ton of great information. I really enjoyed that conversation. And this is why I went from mortgage to financial planning. In the mortgage industry, you probably realize that you're in it. It can be very transactional. You have a relationship with the client, for an intense period of time, 30 days, 45 days, and then it's over. And oftentimes they come back with a refinance or whatnot, but typically you don't get into the really nitty gritty of heavy conversations. As a financial advisor, I knew pretty much everything about my client. I mean, I knew their personal stuff. I knew everything about them, which is really crucial in order to be a good planner and to understand their dreams and goals and desires. And the conversations were, hours long versus a very short period of time in the mortgage business. So that's why I left the mortgage business. I really wanted to have that deeper relationship and connection with my clients. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. I didn't dislike the industry. I didn't dislike being an advisor. I actually really enjoyed it. But I knew that I could only do so much as an advisor. I wanted to make a bigger impact to people nationwide, maybe worldwide. And I couldn't do that. There was just so many hours in a day for me to deal with so many clients, and that was it. So as a coach, where I can facilitate different, group coaching and offer products and whatnot, I know my reach is bigger, which is why I left the world of financial advising.
Is there a tool or a resource or a video that you leverage to be able to help kind of guide you through this transition?
I hired several coaches. One of the best things you can do is invest in yourself. We are our own best resource. So I invested in different coaches. So I had a coach that helped me kind of design my digital course that I created. And it cut, years off of my learning curve. And, I don't know how many hours and dollars I saved by investing in a coach. So I've done, and I'm working with a coach now, a different kind of coach. It's more of a business coach. So you really should invest in a coach that has been there and does, really has that expertise versus jumping onto YouTube and watching, videos. Because when you work with a coach, you're dealing one-on-one with somebody. They know you know them, you go deep. The internet obviously is full of, a lot of good information. It's full of a lot of bad information. So how do you filter out what's good and what's bad? And nobody gets to know you intimately, from the internet. So that's why I decided to hire coaches along the way. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars over time in coaches.
Yeah, I'm on the same page for sure. I mean, I have coaches that I've hired and still hire for various things as well. So it's same page. I was at a conference back in September with authors and podcasters, and there was a woman. Her name is Laura Castleman, and she's a tech, CEO of a company. I forget exactly which company. She wrote a book, and one of the things she talked about was, your comfort zone, and like, if you're stressed out all the time and trying to push, like that can, you can get burnout. And also at the same time, it's like, well, if you're in your comfort zone, then you get stuck. And she talked about how, like, well, yes. So what we've done, or what we talk about, is taking your comfort zone and expanding your comfort zone, and kind of putting mindset and intentional energy on expanding that, and reframing the way you look at things and all that stuff. There's techniques to it and all that stuff. But that's the stuff that just kind of, gets me going to hear those things, because like sometimes we get in our own way of what we can accomplish.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a lot of what I mentioned earlier, the relationship that we have with our money. Because of our childhood and our upbringing and our limiting beliefs that we have, that's in that, DNA, if you will. And we have ancestral, so surprisingly enough, that is also playing a role. I heard this really interesting example just recently. They took mice and they infused cherry blossom smell into where the mice were. And then they would shock their paws. And they would do that several times. And then they would take later the grandchildren, if you will, of the rats that were in this study, and they would blast in the cherry blossom smell, and they would freak out. They didn't blast the paws, but because of the ancestral programming, they were freaked out. Yeah. So we're dealing with, shit from our great grandparents and what they dealt with in the Great Depression or whatever, they had. So we're dealing with a lot of things in our chemistry. And that once we're mindful of that and we understand that, we then can start to unpack it and reprogram and relearn, unlearn, and then relearn the right stuff. But that comfort zone that you speak of, yes, our comfort zone is here. For those that can see the video, if it's on video, it's small because it's familiar, it's safe, it's what we know, even though it's not a great, healthy place. We want our comfort zone to be here for us to grow, financially, emotionally, in our relationships, in our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, all of that. And it's uncomfortable at first because it's not familiar. It's not safe to us. Our first and foremost need as a human being is safety. We all want to know that we're going to be safe. And if we don't have that sense of safety, we resort back to our safe place, even though it's not a good place to be. So, yes, the neuroscience and the understanding of how the mind works with our external results is just a extremely fascinating conversation. So, a lot of times when I'm dealing with clients and money, we go there first because I can teach the mechanics of money all day long, and it's not that it's not hard. I mean, it's not rocket science. Once you understand a mutual fund or an index fund, and you learn to look at the charts and see the expense ratios and performance, I mean, some of those things that's easy. Once you learn it, you got it. But if you're still dealing with this muddy success, story of money, then you're going to be dealing with the same stuff, and that's why you see so many lotto winners who come in millions who don't know how to deal with that. They go through it subconsciously and it's gone, just in a short time later. So yes, Joel, that's a very fascinating conversation for sure. I
Yeah,
have on that.
I know, me too. Like, kind of going back to the mortgage world, I get asked the question, what do you think is going to happen with the markets? Whether it be housing prices or rates and this and that. And I kind of pivoted along the way as I really started thinking about kind of our impact as advisors. I mean, we're in the mortgage world, right? Like our job is to go help somebody buy a house. There's also to plan and advise and be there along the way and kind of help them short term and long term. And the word that I use is trajectory. Like, you know, and I'll come back to that in a second. Like when I'm talking to somebody who wants to buy a house, like right here, right now, they apply, we pull their credit scores, we get the documentation in, and okay, this is where you are. Well, hey, you don't have enough money. Like that's the biggest limiting factor that I see is not people not having enough money to be able to have for down payment and closing costs. And it's like, well, if I could have been talking to a year ago, we could have been maybe working on a plan. And okay, well, then you talk about solutions. Okay, well, maybe somebody taps into a 401k and they borrow money for down payment, or maybe they get a gift of funds and they get help with a down payment. Okay, cool. So let's say somebody's paying $1,500 in rent and they don't have the money saved for down payment and closing. And now they're going to go tap into their 401k, buy a house, and now the payment is $2,500, which is not far out of reason with where prices and rates are. It's like, okay, well, you weren't saving money before and you're going to go buy a house and your payment's $1,000 higher. This doesn't make sense. How are you gonna figure this out? Like you qualify on paper, but maybe your money's going on other places that we don't see on the credit report. And so trajectory, it's like, okay, well, if you're not working on something underlying to be able to increase income, then you're going to be in a tough spot down the road. And maybe it's working on a side hustle, or maybe it's working on a degree or certification to be able to help you get better at your job and make more money at your job. Or maybe somebody's in school and then they're going to be out. So whatever the case may be, trajectory, where are you going to be in a year or two? Are you going up or are you level or maybe even going down? And that's the stuff that I've been trying to talk more about is like, what are you doing underlying to be able to get ahead? Because this, increasing income is something that I've been talking about on this channel a lot because the people, that I talk to, it's like, you see social media and people think that everyone's doing great, but a lot of people that I talk to are struggling to pay the bills, let alone invest. And people choosing to work on a side hustle or working on an agency or a side business to be able to try to make more money. And like the people that I see that are doing those things and investing time and coaching and skills are the ones that I'm seeing get ahead. And that's the stuff that's just so interesting to me as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-sided coin. You absolutely need to, again, invest in yourself to grow and step in that greatness and then step into that greater income and that greater life. On the flip side, it's also taking a good hard look at what you're spending on. And it's not about counting every penny in a budget. It's about really being mindful of what's going on with your spending habits. I see a lot of emotional spending going on. I see a lot of retail therapy because we're having a bad day, a good day, we're bored, we're frustrated. And you know what? That one set of earrings is okay. Or gosh, you know what? This one whatever is not a big deal. It's only $10. And then suddenly over the course of a month, you've just blown through $300 and you could have invested that. You could have saved that. You could have paid down credit card debt with that. You could have done lots of things. So, and I say that to those people lovingly because I have had several clients who, even in the financial services and the mortgage industry, where when we took a good hard look at what they were spending their money on, they saw, I call it leaks in the boat. They just like, oh gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that. I had one client that I worked with who came to me, and this was back when I was in the financial services, and it was a couple, and they made good money, but he was like, I don't know where the money's going. We're not saving enough. And I'm like, okay, let's take a hard look at what's going on here. And long story short, we looked at his bank statements, which was all his, debit card charges, and then his credit cards. And at the end of the day, he was spending about $1,000 a month in eating out or stopping at the 7-Elevens or Jack in the Box, whatever. And it was $1,000 a month on food that was just like money. And he was absolutely completely floored that it was that much. And had you looked at that and gone, okay, that stopped for $10 here, $5 there, $30 there, and then at the end of the month you've gone through $1,000, that could have gone towards credit card debt. That could have gone towards mutual fund investment. That could have gone towards a retirement account or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on too. So yes, you should absolutely look at ways to create more income and create more opportunity. But at the same time, look at where and why you're spending and what's the trigger. Look at the trigger that's going on in your heart when you are spending. And, is it sadness? Is it grief? Is it just boredom? Whatever it is, take a good hard look at that because that's going to be very eye-opening for you.
A conversation about, the biology part in the rats, right? Like that kind of being handed down in generations.
Mhm.
When you look back, you mentioned, this whole process is going back 20 years and you were sobbing on the floor after kind of the situation that was going on with your divorce. And in that moment, you still knew that you wanted to go help people with their finances. How was that in your brain, that far ago? What got you there? What was going on in your upbringing or surroundings or your genetics? I mean, like, how was that there?
Yeah, good question. I can just say my mom is a very loving, caring, generous person. There was 5 kids, and her whole life was about just raising her family. And so I came from a very loving family. My dad was a hard worker, PhD in physics, and he worked on the space shuttles, and incredibly brilliant man with lots of patents and trademarks. But he also taught at a college part time at night because he just loved teaching. So I think I took a little bit of each of their DNA. I love to teach. I'm a teacher at heart, which is where the coaching comes in, and I just have a heart to serve, and I want to just leave this world a better place. I mean, I would rather leave this world a better place and leave a legacy knowing that I touched lives than leave with $10 million in the bank, right?
Totally. The neuroscience part of it and the biology part of it, how did you get more, aware or entrenched in that side of things?
It was a journey as I started this path and this process of education. Years ago, I got certified as a life coach, and I got kind of introduced to that, originally there. And then I got certified as an executive coach and got a little bit there. And then I would listen to podcasts, and then I'm an avid reader, so I'd read lots of books. And then through some of the coaching that I've had, these various coaches, a lot of that is there was a lot of mindset coaching and a lot of education. And I just sort of gravitated towards that piece of it because it was so fascinating to me. And I see so much of that in my own life as well. And I mean, I'm not this evolved, fully healed person. I never will be. We all are on this journey and will continue to be on this journey. But I was so fascinated how we can, with the power of our mind, with the power of just knowledge, create such beautiful, peaceful existences if we just start to unpack that and embrace it and not get stuck in the mud of, oh, well, this is just my life. This is the way it's going to always be. This is my, this is the way it's going to always just be for me. No, it's not. I don't care where you came from. You always have the choice. Every morning you wake up, you have a choice.
You mentioned at the very beginning about, understanding and being aware or mapping out, where you want to go and, getting it's into something specific. As you've kind of gone through this journey from mortgage to financial advising to actually running your own coaching business, does something stand out about, your vision or your goal or what you want out of life in terms of how you would put that into words and what you focused on as you were going through this journey or this transition to this business that you have right now? And what were you focused on as kind of an end game or a purpose?
There was probably several things, and I think this comes with just age because I'm not going to say old because that's not what I use, but I'm wiser. And I think as you get older and wiser, you get more focused on what it is that you really want in life and what your priorities are. I found that time, freedom, and impact were a very huge factor for me. In the financial world, whether it was financial planning or mortgage, you're putting in long days, you're putting in lots of hours. I had no time freedom. And I didn't feel like I was making the impact that I wanted. And I knew that I wanted to do something different in that realm, as I mentioned earlier. So that navigation of, you know what, I'm in a place in my life where I am just not going to work, you know, dollars for days. I want more. Yes, I want financial freedom, but I want time freedom. I want to know that I am inspiring somebody. I'm making a ripple effect. And if I can reach 1,000 women, and then they can turn around and reach 1,000 women, or they can teach their kids, and then that ripple effect goes out, then over time, you know I'm going to be impactful to who knows how many people in the world. And it's just little old Patty Handy here. I'm not going to, I'm not, Oprah, but if I can do something in my little world, I'm going to do it. So I think just along that journey, it's just the evolution of who I've become, and I've been more comfortable and confident stepping into that my greatness and stepping into that place of risk. And I did actually. This is interesting. It came a time where I was more afraid of regret of not doing it than the fear of regret of doing it and failing. If I do this for a couple of years and it doesn't take off, or I don't, whatever reason, it doesn't work, I'm going to be perfectly okay with that, because I know that I did it, I tried, and I won't be looking back going, gosh, just what if I had done that? What if I really just went out and did it my own and trusted my gut and just followed my that passion project? I won't have that, and that regret won't be there.
Is that something that you would say you always had that inside of you, or something that evolved or adjusted or changed over time?
That has definitely evolved over time, and I think it's as I've gotten older, and now that I'm in my final third quarter of life. I'm not sure how to say that. I'm 63. I'll just put it out there.
Okay.
Let's call it what it is, right? So I, relatively later in life, have done this pivot. Most of my friends are looking at Medicare and retiring, and I'm like, I got too much left to do in this world. I've got, too much energy, and I've got too much that I still want to do. Do I want to work less hours later? Absolutely. When my son has babies, I'm going to want to play with my grandbabies. Absolutely. I don't want to be putting in, long days. I want the flexibility to work around my schedule. But that evolution of just prioritizing life and prioritizing what's most important to me, that has come with just getting older and wiser.
As a single parent, you know, doing that on your own, I can't even imagine, doing a job, raising kids, I'm sure you had support along the way. But any specific tips or efficiency strategies that helped you along the way be able to get more out of your day?
Efficiency steps. Well, it was interesting because yes, my son was 18 months old and it was me. I did have, my sisters and my parents and wonderful friends that did help and support along the way in terms of, I need an hour with a client. Here, take my son. And, I dropped him off at my sister's house. So yes, that was priceless. I would say you have to be super focused, super organized. At the same time, you have to plan, yet you have to take it one step at a time, if that even makes sense. Because
Yeah.
you got to have a plan, but 5-year plans are for the birds, right? There's so much in life that changes in 5 years. It just doesn't happen. So, and if we think so far out, it's overwhelming, and then we get stuck. So if you just focus on, let's just focus on the next month. Now, when I was fresh out of my divorce, I was focused on the day. Like, how do I get to the end of this day without, you know, losing it? And so, depending on where you are in your journey, you just got to give yourself some grace and trust your intuition and take care of yourself and make sure that your physical, mental, emotional well being is in place. But just, I mean, you spoke of efficiency, but I think that it's all intertwined. The personal well being, the self care, the prioritization of what's needs to get done, staying really super organized. I don't love the word time management. It just sounds so restrictive, but you have
Mhm.
to have some kind of plan in place. You've got to have some direction.
Yeah. Understanding the priorities, what has to get done
Yeah.
before the other stuff. You know, the next kind of goals for the business, what are some of the things that you're working on going forward?
So right now I offer one-on-one personal coaching, and I have a program, Minding Her Money, which is a online digital course. I'm going to evolve into doing some group programs, and then perhaps do some VIP days. I've also considered doing corporate financial wellness workshops. I know there's lots of companies who want to help their employees feel more comfortable when it comes to their money, and they need that tender loving care, so to speak. So I will come in, generally virtually, because I want to be able to, track people nationwide and do these workshops. And we address the mindset. We address the relationship with our money and that whole neuroscience stuff. We also address the mechanics and the investing and the debt and the credit and some of those pieces. So I've got a couple things that I have in place that as far as long term, the corporate is now, and the group coaching is probably a little bit sometime next year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know, from a standpoint of putting information out there, putting your story out there, you know, the question of, hey, if you'd have known this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, where would you be now? I hate that question because for me personally, I answer that question in the sense that, like, hey, well, even if I had that information 10 years ago, would I have been in the right mindset to receive it and actually implement it and have the right purpose to be able to use the information? And who knows, maybe not. And so, with that kind of lens and that mindset, what's one thing that has just blown you away with this journey that you just couldn't even imagine happening, that never even entered your brain, say 10, 20 years ago, something that just happened that never even thought could be possible?
I think if I looked back, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if I look back and understood where I'd be today, I wouldn't necessarily. Well, I shouldn't say I wouldn't believe it, because I always had an entrepreneur in me. I always liked the idea of being my own creative and having that limitless capacity to do what I wanted. The mindset piece, the neuroscience piece, that is very huge. I'll address one thing that you had said earlier, like what would wish you knew back then, and I'm sure this probably rings true for you too. If I knew, like in my early 20s, the power of compounding interest and the power of time, and I took advantage of that, even if I invested $50 a month, I would be sitting in a very different financial picture today than if I had followed that. So one of the things that I do, I've done some teaching at schools and I've done some workshops for young adults. That's one of the things I teach, because if they understood that, if they look at, here's your money 30 years from now, you've only put in this much money, but you have this much money. The rest of it is your money working for you. This is free money. Do you understand the power of that? So skip something now, invest a little bit, get in that habit, like you have that habit of 2 minutes, get in the habit of, auto investing $50 a month. And then when you start making money in your career, up it. But I'm going off a tangent a little bit there, but the point is that, yeah, the power of compounding interest would have been really wonderful if I had known that back then. But, again, looking back, I think, number one, my journey isn't over. I think I'm going to probably do something in the next 5 years that I haven't even conceived of, because I think that some of the most amazing jobs out there in the world don't even exist today. So I'm open, and I'm much more open to opportunities than I was before.
That's awesome. Yeah. And like you kind of mentioned, doing some workshops with corporations and whatnot. And, we're in this kind of weird, changing, adjusting landscape with people being in an office and not in an office and remote. And, at the in reality, I mean, people are losing jobs, and then people are picking up stuff that are more 1099 or contracting things. And just so the things are in flux.
Mhm.
And I really truly believe that the more sound somebody is with their own health and financial health and where they're trying to go, the better employees that they're going to be for the company. Because, like, I know me personally, as I've kind of gone down this path of building this platform, it's like I've become more crystallized and more clear of, like, okay, so if I do this better right here and more, if I can figure out ways to be more efficient and better at this job, then that means that I can be able to do more over here and help more people. And person on the podcast, Alex Jacobs, working for a corporation, full-time job, had a couple side gigs, and, had a couple startups that he was working on, and went two different times 12 months of building off the stuff, and the startup never really, got to the end line and where it all would pay off. And in that same conversation about, it didn't work out, blah, blah, blah. And some people would be like, yeah, it was terrible. I wasted all this time, blah, blah, blah. And in that same breath, instead of being like that, he was, yeah. And at the same time, I got better at what I was doing for my main job, and I got a raise and blah, blah, blah. And here I am today. Like, it was all forward looking and all opportunity looking rather than the opposite. And like, that's the stuff that gets me pumped up. But anyway, not to digress. In terms of your platforms, we talked about the website and anything else you want to share for people to be able to get a hold of you.
And no, I think the website's a great place to start. So, like I said, download the ebook, jump on the contact page, book a call with me, have a conversation. Let me see how I can help you. That's kind of the best place to start. I want to definitely come back to something that you were talking about in terms of the corporate workshops. If there's one thing that came out of COVID, it's the power that everybody is very comfortable with Zoom. And we're doing these corporate workshops virtually. So whether you're at home or in an office, it doesn't really matter. You can just jump on a Zoom. And the cool thing is that we do address those things that help them become more at peace in their workplace and at home. About 50% of employees are, study, are stressed about money. And because of that, they bring this less productivity, less efficiency to the office. And so the employer's bottom line is being affected by the employees' issues at home. So if they bring in somebody to help them, whether it's a financial coach or a health coach, and they teach them how to exercise and take, good nutrition and whatever else physically, or, somebody helps them through the mental health challenges that we're having, or whatever it is to help us as humans from a holistic place, that's just a better all around, right? The employees are happier, the employers are happier, everybody wins. It's just it's a great opportunity for everybody to become better and help each other out. So I'm definitely a big advocate of that. And your friend who had that opportunity mindset of, yeah, but I got better at this and this. I mean, that's fantastic. You look at every big success story, from the Russell Bransons of the world to the Oprahs of the world to the, Apple. I mean, everything. They all had, how many times was it? 10,000 times Edison took before he figured out the light bulb thing. It's like everybody has this, these failures. I call it feedback. I don't like the word failure because it makes it sound like it's a bad thing. But, we all have failures to get to success. It's all, a learning curve. So you can look at that as like, oh man, that was a waste. Or you can look at it like, yeah, well, I'm smarter and wiser and that much better at now at this and this. So it definitely is how you look at that, how you perceive that.
Yeah, I know for me personally, like, it's a process. I have to work on that kind of stuff every day, whether it be reading certain things or looking at my goals or, all kinds of various things. But yeah, um, last thing, is there any type of process or habit or thing that you work on consistently that kind of falls in the same type of lane? Any habits or things that you do that you want to share?
I am very focused on kind of two main things. Well, I shouldn't say two main things. Physically and from a learning perspective. When I wake up, I start with prayer. I meditate for half an hour. I work out. And so I take care of my physical and mental well-being first, and then I get my day started. And then I will focus on what I can learn. I'm an avid reader, so I take a lot of reading in. Usually that happens at night. It's not during the weekday when I'm working. But I'm always looking at ways to improve and get better. So it's what books are out there. I've got a stack on my nightstand. It's probably a foot tall with books I'm reading, and depending upon my mood, I'll pick up, a book. But it's, yeah, I would just say really focus on what things that you do to better yourself physically, emotionally, and then have fun. I started pickleball. That's a blast. I just gotten on that, a little late in the game, but that's a lot of fun. So find things that are fun, find things that bring you joy, find things that bring you peace and quiet, find a place for stillness so you can listen to your intuition. So whether that's prayer, meditation, whatever, exercise obviously is super important. So do those things to take care of yourself. And then you bring all that to your place of work.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Well, Patti, I can't wait to have you back on again down the road and hear some more success stories and hear more about your business journeys. And Patti Handy, thanks again.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.